You're just playing soldier, sweetie. Real heroes don't brag about being medics, that's what my mom said to me the last time I came home. The word medic came out of her mouth like it tasted wrong, like it burned just to say it. And still, I wore the uniform. Not to prove anything. Not to make a scene. But because I earned it, every single stripe, every pin, every scar buried beneath that pressed fabric. My name's Jordan Kelly. I'm 36 years old, and I was a combat medic in the United States Army. These days, I teach trauma response at Walter Reed, training the next generation how to keep people alive under fire. But none of that matters at my parents' house. At that house, I'm still the girl who never quite fit in. The one who quit piano. The one who didn't get married, didn't give them a grandson, didn't show up in heels for Thanksgiving, but in boots. Have you ever walked into a room full of people you share blood with and still felt like a stranger? Ever sat through dinner pretending every bite didn't taste like betrayal? Because that's what it feels like when no one really sees you. Before I go on, take a second to hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is right now. You're about to hear a story that's going to sound unreal. But every part of it? It's burned into me like shrapnel. It started last Thanksgiving. The driveway was still cracked like it was when I was a kid. The front porch light flickered like a warning. I parked my car on the street, God forbid I block my brother's shiny new Escalade. I stepped out, my boots hitting the pavement with that heavy thud, and the cold started creeping up my sleeves before I even got to the front door. The welcome mat still read, "Bless this mess." Fitting, I knocked, not because I had to, but because I knew they needed time. Time to sigh. Time to remind themselves to be polite. My dad opened the door. His eyes went straight to my uniform. You're not in combat anymore, you know. You can wear regular clothes. No hello. No how was the drive? Just that. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon rolls and judgment. My mom hugged me, if you can call it that. Her arms stiff. Her smile faker than the centerpiece on the table. You're early, she muttered, like that was somehow a problem. My brother, Evan, walked in. All 6'3" of corporate success, wearing a designer sweater and a smirk. He clapped me on the back like I was a coworker he barely remembered. Still playing Army girl, huh? I sat down at the table next to an empty chair, one with a name card that read, Sergeant J. Kelly. Not Jordan. Not daughter. Just a rank. A placeholder. Dinner was roasted turkey and a whole lot of awkward silence, every time I tried to share something. Someone cut me off. Evan bragged about his latest app deal. Mom talked about her yoga instructor. Dad launched into a story, again, about meeting a retired senator at the country club. I tried to talk about a little girl I helped in Syria. She was 7. Lost both her parents in a missile strike. I carried her 2 miles to a makeshift clinic in the dark. Her name was Noura. She smiled at me, even with cracked ribs and bleeding lungs, but before I got to the part where the explosion hit, Mom coughed and said, "Let's not talk about bombs at the dinner table. It's Thanksgiving." So I shut up. Even the cranberry sauce looked like it pitted me. Later, I slipped out back to the same yard where I used to run barefoot. The stars were too dim to see. My breath fogged in the cold. I stood there, hands shoved deep in my pockets, wondering why I came. Why I ever come back. Inside, they were laughing. Warm. Untouched by guilt, and it hit me, I am not one of them. Not really, I'm the ghost of the girl they used to know, now wrapped in a uniform they'll never respect, and still, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there. Still. Silent. Like the medic I was trained to be. Watching. Breathing. Waiting. That night, I slept in the guest room. Same twin bed. No photos on the walls. It smelled like lemon cleaner and distance. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Noura. wondering if she remembered my name. No one here did. Morning came without apology. My mom avoided my eyes. My dad left early for the golf course. Evan didn't even say goodbye. I sat on the edge of that bed, staring at my hands. These hands had held arteries closed, dragged men out of collapsed buildings, sewn flesh while gunfire cracked the air. And in this house, they were just hands. Idle. Unwanted. Unremarkable. I packed in silence. The sound of the zipper closing felt like the end of a chapter. I looked back once. The house didn't notice, and I swear I heard my own voice whisper, "You came looking for something you already built without them." That day, I drove back to base. And I didn't look back, because sometimes home isn't where you were born. It's where you bled. And they still saw you, the day I stopped crying? It wasn't when they hurt me. It was when I realized they never had the power to. Not really. I didn't grow up poor. We had a house, a yard, a golden retriever named Max, and matching holiday pajamas. But I did grow up invisible. There was only room for one bright future in our family, and Evan staked his claim on it before he even hit puberty. He was the golden boy, the quarterback, the honor roll king, the early Stanford admit. The mailman knew his name. The pastor talked about him in sermons. My parents didn't just love Evan. They revolved around him. Me? I was background noise. I played with bugs, took apart radios. Read field medicine manuals in the back corner of the library. While other girls perfected their cheer routines, I was learning how to stop a hemorrhage in under 5 minutes. I told my parents once, just once, that I wanted to be a combat medic. My dad laughed. My mom blinked. "You mean like a nurse?" "No," I said, standing tall in my teenage certainty. "Like a combat medic. I want to serve. I want to save people." She looked at me like I'd said I wanted to become a circus act. Then she asked, "Have you thought about cosmetology school?" From that moment on, every conversation felt like a warning. "Don't waste your looks," she'd say. "Who's going to marry someone who gets shot at for a living? Stop being so dramatic, Jordan." But it wasn't drama. It was clarity. On my 18th birthday, I enlisted. No big speech. No going away party. Just a printed application left on the kitchen counter and a bedroom cleaned so spotless it could have been listed on Zillow. Mom didn't call. Dad didn't write. Evan sent a 2-word text. Why though? Still, I never cried. Not in basic when I threw up from dehydration. Not in training when I had to jam my fingers into a fake chest cavity screaming life over limb while alarms blared. Not even the first time I heard live gunfire ripping through the air above me in a desert whose name I couldn't even pronounce. Every time I felt the urge to cry. I remembered that dinner table. That silence. That empty chair with Sergeant J. Kelly printed on it like I was a ghost haunting my own home. If I cried now, they'd win, so I got sharper. Smarter. Meaner, maybe. But also more precise. I didn't rise through the ranks because I was fearless. I rose because I knew what it felt like to be ignored. I got good at listening. At seeing pain behind bluster. At moving toward it when others backed away. It made me a damn good medic. I remember one night during my second deployment in Afghanistan. Our convoy got hit. IED, hidden in the dirt like a lie, 3 soldiers gone instantly. The rest bleeding, screaming, scattered. I crawled under gunfire to get to a kid named Martinez. He was 19, from El Paso. His leg was hanging on by a thread and a prayer. He kept whispering, "Don't tell my mom. Please don't tell my mom." I held his hand. I applied pressure. I whispered back, "You'll tell her yourself." He lived. Because I didn't freeze. Because I didn't cry. I cried later. In the dark. Alone, but even then, it wasn't about the blood. It was about the fact that I'd finally become someone. Someone real, and my family would never know. Because they'd already made up their minds about me. There was this one time, years into my service, when I went home for a quick visit. Just a week. Just to see if maybe something had shifted. Evan had a new job, a new wife. A baby on the way. He greeted me like I was a barista who spelled his name wrong. Dad asked if I was still doing that soldier thing. Mom said, "You look tired, dear. Have you thought about trying eye cream?" I didn't even unpack my bag. I slept 2 nights in the same guest room with the lemon cleaner and the twin bed. Then I left. No goodbye, and I didn't cry, because that was the moment I finally understood something. Some people only see who you were, never who you become, even knowing that, even after everything, I still kept going back. Because some broken part of me still believed maybe it could be fixed, but war. War gave me something my family never could, not violence. Not hate, clarity, real feeling, the kind that breaks through you in the silence of a triage tent at 2 a.m. When the bleeding has stopped. When the only sound left is the beep of a monitor and the soft inhale of a breath you thought was gone forever. It's not the kind of feeling you get in a Hallmark movie. It's raw. Quiet. Real, and in that stillness, you remember you're human. My third deployment was the hardest, not because of the enemy, but because of who I had become. By then, I had 3 commendations. I could apply a tourniquet in the dark in under 90 seconds. I knew how to assess an injury before the commanding officer finished shouting, but it wasn't until Fallujah that I earned my ghost. We were called to support a civilian convoy. They'd taken a wrong turn and ended up in a kill zone. Flames. Screams. Mothers sobbing. Children crawling through twisted wreckage. One of our team leaders got shot through the hip. Still tried to direct traffic with a piece of rebar stuck in his thigh. And then I saw her, a girl, maybe 10 years old, lying near an overturned van. Her hand limp. Face pressed to the gravel. I didn't think, I didn't ask, I didn't wait for orders. I ran, bullets hissed past like bees. My boots skidded on shattered glass. I slid beside her, knees ripping open on the pavement. She was breathing. Barely. A piece of metal was lodged deep in her side. I pressed down. Screamed for help, no one came, so I picked her up, all 25 bloody pounds of her, and I ran. Through smoke. Through fire. Through 2 blocks of hell, to a safe house guarded by stunned Marines who didn't know what to do with a medic carrying a child like a wounded angel, but she lived, and I passed out. When I woke up, I was flat on my back in a hospital bed, concussion, 2 fractured ribs, 22 stitches down my side. I could barely breathe. My mouth was dry. My uniform was gone, replaced by a gown that smelled like disinfectant and dust. A commander I didn't recognize came to see me. He didn't smile. Didn't sit. Next time, he said flatly, "Wait for the order." That was it. No thank you. No, you saved her. Just protocol, but the girl lived. 3 days later. Her aunt found her. They brought her in to see me before I was transferred. She had a fresh bandage, wide brown eyes, and a lollipop in her hand. She walked over, still limping, but alive, and whispered, "You are brave." And I lost it. That was the first time a child ever saw me cry, not because I was weak, because for once, someone saw me. No conditions. No disappointment. No judgment. Just brave. My mom never knew. I told her I'd gotten injured. She said, "Well, maybe that's a sign it's time to come home and do something safer, like teaching." Like I'd been playing in traffic and finally got what was coming. To her, my career was just a phase. Something that could be returned. Like a bad dress, but war didn't break me. It built me into someone real. Someone clear. I didn't need my family's pride. I had something better, proof. Proof that I'd saved lives. And, maybe, in doing that, saved myself. Still, deep down, some part of me kept hoping they'd ask, what did it feel like? To hold someone's artery shut while they begged for their life, Why did I go back? Again and again, was I scared, was I proud, but they never asked. Pretending was easier. Pretending I was still the weird little girl who quit piano and ran like a boy. Who didn't wear makeup. Who never smiled enough for the camera. Who was always too much. So eventually, I gave up trying. Then one day, an envelope arrived, not handwritten. No warmth. A typed invitation. White cardstock. Silver letters. Expensive and cold, Derek's wedding, Napa. Black tie. RSVP required, but what stopped me wasn't the details, it was the name on the envelope, Sergeant Jordan Kelly, no dear. No sis. Just a rank. Like that was the only way they knew how to address me anymore. I stared at that envelope for an hour, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I did. They weren't inviting me, they were tolerating me. The subtext was loud and clear, you can come. Just don't wear the uniform. Don't talk about your service. Don't ruin the picture. I set the invitation down gently and said to the empty room, I'll go. But not for them. When I arrived at the venue, I was a storm in silk, dress uniform, polished to perfection. Boots shined. Ribbons lined up with precision. Hair in a regulation bun. I wasn't playing dress up. I wasn't rebelling, I was showing up as who I am. The valet did a double take. His eyes flitted from my medals to my face. Thank you for your service, ma'am, he said, like he wasn't sure if that was the right line for a woman in uniform. I nodded. You're welcome. Inside, the venue smelled like lavender and money. Everything was cream-colored and curated. A string quartet played something delicate and forgettable. The whole thing was built for Instagram. Not intimacy. My boots clicked across imported tile, heads turned, some stared too long. Some didn't look long enough, then I heard it, oh. You wore that? My mother's voice, she was in a gray gown. Pearls at her throat. Her face frozen tight with forced elegance. I didn't see a dress code that excluded national service. I replied calmly. She flinched, barely. But it was there. Well, we just didn't want to draw too much attention. It's Derek's day, after all. Of course. Wouldn't want a decorated veteran upstaging Mr. Crypto Finance with a fake smile and a net worth that fluctuated with the market. My father appeared. No comment on the uniform. Just handed me a drink I didn't ask for and wandered off. Then came the bride's mother. A woman I'd never met. She leaned in close, whispered like I was a zoo animal behind glass. I heard you're a doctor of some kind. So noble. We were just saying how wonderful it is that Derek's sister could make it all the way out here. I bit my tongue. Smiled. I'm a combat medic. Oh, like an army nurse? I kept smiling. No. Like a medic who runs through live fire to treat gunshot wounds while holding pressure with one hand and a rifle in the other. Her face drained of color. I took a sip of the champagne and walked away. The ceremony was held outside, beneath a trellis wrapped in white roses. Rows of chairs lined up like soldiers. I sat in the second row again, next to another empty seat. No one beside me made small talk. They didn't know what to do with me. When the music started and Derek came down the aisle, he gave me a quick glance. No smile. Just a flicker of discomfort, like he was waiting for me to ruin it. Waiting for me to make a scene. Remind the room that their hero had once told his sister she'd never be anything but angry in combat boots. I didn't say a word. I wasn't there for vengeance, but I wasn't going to pretend either. At the reception, I got cornered by a group of cousins. One of them nudged my arm. So, like. What do you actually do? Like, day to day? I looked him dead in the eyes. I triage trauma cases in combat zones. I decide who lives and who dies. I stop bleeding with my bare hands. I've memorized the skeletal system in 4 languages. And when I'm not doing that, I teach young medics how not to die while doing the same. Mouths dropped open, one of them laughed, kind of nervous, damn. Okay. I thought you were just, like, intense. But that's kinda badass. I nodded. It is. I didn't owe them softness. But I gave them honesty. Then someone tapped my shoulder. I turned around, and standing there, flanked by two Secret Service agents, was the President of the United States. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. The man standing in front of me was older than his pictures. Broad shoulders. Lined face. Eyes that looked like they'd seen too much but still carried weight. And yet, he was unmistakable. The President of the United States extended his hand toward me. You're Sergeant Jordan Kelly, right? Yes, sir, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. He gripped my hand, firmly, not like a photo op, and didn't let go too fast. Then, in front of my entire family, he said, I've read your file. You've saved more lives than most generals I know. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time. The air left the room, or maybe just my lungs. I couldn't hear the clinking glasses or the buzz of whispers building behind me. All I felt was the way my mother's breath caught behind me, the silence of people who suddenly didn't know what to say. The president turned toward the guests and smiled. She didn't just serve. She changed how we train for battlefield medicine. Because of her, combat survival rates improved by nearly 40% in several regions. That's not just bravery, that's genius under fire. He said it like a benediction. I stood there in full uniform, still, sharp, unwavering, as his words settled over the room like ash. Not because I needed the praise, but because I needed them to hear it, from someone they couldn't ignore. He posed for a photo with me. Said he'd be in touch. There was a seat opening on a national health policy task force. Then he left, just like that, but the silence that followed, it was heavier than the medals on my chest. When I turned, my father was staring at the floor. My brother looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My mother's hands trembled, her lips parting to say something, but nothing came out, and honestly? That silence said everything. They say life gets divided into before and after moments. For some, it's a wedding, a birth, a loss. For me, it wasn't the firefight in Kandahar, not the girl with shrapnel in her side, not even the reprimand I got for breaking protocol. It was the order I disobeyed. 6 months before Derek's wedding, we were embedded with a NATO unit clearing a supply route. Word came in, possible IED under an old fruit stand. Drone sweep showed nothing. So we advanced. That's when it happened. A blast behind us lit up the convoy. Fire swallowed metal. The shockwave flipped our Humvee like a toy. I smashed my head against the window, then everything went black. When I came to, I was upside down. The driver was dead. The gunner unconscious. Our lieutenant bleeding out, pinned by twisted steel. Smoke stung my lungs as I crawled free. Screams. Gunfire. Heat pressing down like a second skin. It was a trap. I radioed for backup, no signal. Then I saw them, civilians, a child sob slicing through the chaos. High-pitched. Scared. Real, negative, barked my commanding officer through static. Do not approach the civilians. Unknown threat. Hold your position. But I couldn't. Because I saw her, a little girl, no older than 8, curled behind a crate. Blood streaked her face. In her arms was a swaddled infant, wrapped in something torn and clutched tight. I knew the risk, I knew the rules, but I also knew that if I didn't move, 2 kids were going to die in the dirt, so I moved. I crossed open ground, 150 meters of pure hell. Bullets whipped past like hornets. My med pack took a hit. The ground exploded next to my boots. My side burned from a graze I didn't register until hours later. I dropped to my knees beside her, used my body to shield both kids. The baby was weak, barely breathing. The girl had a fractured arm and burns up her left side. I whispered in Pashto that they were safe, wrapped them in my jacket, and lifted them into my arms. Then I ran again, a private provided covering fire as I sprinted toward a damaged Humvee that hadn't been hit. We made it, they lived, so did I, but my spotless record didn't. Later, in the command tent, I was called to account. You disobeyed a direct order, the CO said. Yes, sir. You jeopardized the team. With respect, sir, no one else was moving. He rubbed his face. Tired. Worn. You're not a hero, Sergeant. You're lucky. And we can't build protocol around luck. They gave me a formal warning. No demotion. Just a mark on my file. A quiet message, this one's unpredictable. But that night, someone left a note on my bunk, no name. Just a folded piece of paper with a faint fingerprint of dried blood on the corner. It read, because of you, there are 2 fewer graves in this country. Thank you. Later, I found out the helmet cam footage of that rescue made its way to DC. They showed it in a secure briefing. No one spoke for a full minute afterward. And someone, somewhere, whispered, find her. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew in that moment was the look in that little girl's eyes when I pressed gauze to her wound. It was a look I'd never once seen in my mother's. When I got back stateside, I didn't tell my family, not about the mission. Not about the scar down my ribs. Not about the children. Why? Because I already knew the script. Dad would grunt something about being reckless. Mom would ask if I'd considered going back to school. Derek wouldn't answer at all, so I stayed silent, because I finally understood their approval wasn't a currency I needed to survive. The night before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, I arrived wearing my uniform. Not to be difficult. Not to steal the spotlight, but because it was the most honest thing I owned. I hadn't even taken off my coat when my mother leaned in and whispered, "You're wearing that again?" She said it like it was an accusation. Like my ribbons were scars she couldn't cover up with foundation. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice, I just said, "I'm not here for the photo." She pressed her lips together like she was holding in a scream. Could you wear something more neutral tomorrow? Something less intense? Like I was a ticking bomb at her curated table, I nodded slowly and said, my uniform is neutral. It's the most unfiltered part of me. Then I turned and walked away. The next day, the wedding was perfect. Golden light spilled over rows of white chairs. The guests were all smiling. Posed. Cropped like a Pinterest board, I sat in the second row again. Same empty seat beside me. Same silence, but this time, it wasn't isolating, because something had shifted. Not in them, in me. My mother had tried to move me to a different seat for symmetry. Derek had barely looked my way. But I didn't care anymore, because I could feel it. Whispers. Side glances. People recognizing me. Some from old military newsletters. Others from local stories now making their way around Facebook. Most from the night before, when the President of the United States raised a glass to me at the reception and called me a pioneer in battlefield medicine. He didn't just shake my hand, he stood next to me and said aloud what my family never could, she didn't just serve. She changed the standard. She taught us how to survive the unsurvivable. And as he said it, my mother blinked like someone who had looked at the sun too long. My father clutched his drink and wouldn't meet my eyes. Derek? He looked like he wanted to crawl under the cake table and disappear. I didn't grin. I didn't smirk, I just stood there, still. Solid, not because I needed revenge, because this wasn't about payback. It was about truth. After the music started and the champagne flowed, people came up to me, a cousin I hadn't spoken to since middle school, a bridesmaid who said her brother was in the Navy, a young server, barely 18, who looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Ma'am, I want to be like you someday. I'm joining the reserves after graduation." And in that moment, I saw what my family couldn't, that I had become more than they ever imagined. Eventually, the photographer called for formal family portraits. Out of habit, I started to walk away, not out of bitterness. Just instinct. That's when I heard the photographer's voice, loud and clear, "Excuse me, miss, are you the soldier?" We need you front and center. I froze, everyone turned, my mother opened her mouth, maybe to argue, but then she stopped. Because before she could say a word, the president, who had stayed longer than planned, stepped forward, smiled, and said, "I think this family's most decorated member belongs right in the middle. Don't you?" So there I stood, center frame. Boots shining beneath silk and lace, medals gleaming, face calm, and as the camera shutter clicked, I didn't think about what they used to call me. I thought about Nura, about Martinez, about the little girl I carried through flames, and her baby brother wrapped in my jacket, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was proving anything, I just felt at peace. After the photo, my mother approached me. Hesitant. Slow. Her hand reached out, shaking slightly, and touched mine. "I didn't know," she whispered. I looked at her. Not coldly. Just. "Clearly, you never asked." She nodded once, not an apology, but maybe the beginning of one. That night, I stood alone on the balcony of the villa. The grapevines below rustled like waves. Inside, laughter bubbled up like champagne, polished, practiced, perfect, but I wasn't bitter anymore, because I knew now that peace doesn't come from being understood, it comes from knowing who you are, even when others don't. A cousin joined me outside. Someone I barely remembered. He offered me a glass of water, not wine. We stood in silence for a minute, then he said, "I used to think you were just angry." I looked at him. I was. He nodded like that helped him understand, then he said, "It's hard, not being seen. Especially by your own family." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. His hand landed gently on my shoulder before he turned and walked back inside. And that small gesture, more than the president's speech, more than the applause, reminded me that sometimes recognition doesn't roar, sometimes it's just quiet. In the days that followed, my inbox filled, cousins, guests, strangers, people who had seen the story on the news. President honors combat medic at private ceremony. I didn't post the photo. Someone else did, and it spread. Suddenly, people were asking about combat medics. Triage. How one woman changed the survival rate in modern war zones, without ever firing a bullet. Young women wrote asking how to enlist. Nurses asked how to cross-train. Mothers asked how to raise daughters in a world that doesn't always reward strength. And buried in all that, one message, from Derek, 2 words, "I'm sorry." I didn't respond, not because I hadn't forgiven him, but because forgiveness doesn't always require an audience. Weeks later, I stood in a classroom at Walter Reed, watching new recruits struggle with pressure bandages and shaky hands. One of them looked up and asked, "Ma'am, are you the one from that video? The one with the kids?" I smiled. "Yeah," I said. "But I'm also the one who's gonna fail you if you wrap that like a Christmas present." The class laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed too. Not politely. Not out of duty, a real, full laugh, that cracked something open in me that I didn't even know was still healing. Later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my dress uniform. I hadn't worn it since the wedding, the metals still shimmered. The fabric still smelled like ceremony and sweat, but now, it wasn't just a symbol of who I had to become in spite of my family, it was who I chose to be because of what they couldn't see, and for the first time, I thought about my mother's hand, trembling in mine. Not letting go. Like she finally saw what I'd been all along. The truth is, I don't need to be in the center of the photo, I don't need the headlines, I don't even need the medal. What I needed, what I had chased for years, was proof that I wasn't worthless, and I got that. Not from the people who raised me, but from the lives I touched, from the little girl in Syria who gave me a lollipop, from the soldier who bled in my arms and whispered, "Tell my wife I wasn't scared." From every quiet soul who saw me not as too much or too hard, but just enough to make a difference. So now, when people ask who I am, I don't give them my rank first, I say, "I'm Jordan. I'm 36. I've seen war. I've saved strangers. I've learned to live with silence. My family once called me too much. But the president stood beside me, looked me in the eye, and said, "You saved more lives than any general I know." And you know what? I believe him, because now, I believe me. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something inside you, if it reminded you that your worth isn't measured by who accepts you, drop a comment. Share your truth. You don't need permission to be extraordinary, just the courage to stand in it, uniform or not.